but pause it on the computer so that I don't, you know, have two streams going.
Hey y'all, I'm here with TN Spittin. Many of y'all know and love from Twitter. We are. How you doing, Doctor Spittin?
I asked y'all not to perceive me, but that problem was apparently a little bit too hard to overcome for y'all. So I will allow you this very once to proceed. Yeah, it's not a problem. It's good to be with y'all.
Hell
Just this
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Y'all, hey y'all in the chat, tell me if you can hear me. Tell me if you can hear TN very well. All right. Um, so I'm excited about this stream. Jason Voorhees says it has finally arrived, so I think a lot of people are very excited about this stream. Um, Textor says I can hear you both. That's great. Get some howdies in the chat. Uh, get some Comrade Lennons in the chat. Okay, good. Hey Jess, how you doing? So, what we're gonna do this presentation. I'm gonna try not to take up too much of TN's time tonight. Um, we are gonna go through some of the ideas of Malcolm X. One thing that I noticed, and TN, you can tell me if this is your perception or not. But I felt like a lot of the media that I was looking at with Malcolm X was very it was very centered around history, as in like centered around his life, and many times seemed to kind of glance over a lot of what he was actually what he thought, what he taught. Um, and so I wanted to focus for once instead of doing a big history lesson, focus on a little bit more about what he talks about specifically in his book, his autobiography. What do you do you feel like they don't talk about what he actually thought enough?
Yeah, I feel like they don't talk about what he thought enough. Brother Malcolm was a very beautiful and complicated human being. He was. And it's actually not even really possible to talk about him without it being a little bit of a history lesson because his life worked in stages the way they did. There was the pre-mega stage and the post-mega stage, and these comprise what at first seemed to be two totally different worldviews, but
Mm-hmm.
then as you start to analyze things, you start to realize, like, actually, as he was advancing and engaging in what he probably wouldn't have even identified as the dialectic, but was definitely the dialectic, these worldviews were compatible, and he ended up reaching the logical conclusion that a well-traveled person engaging in dialectical materialism might end up reaching. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it and revealing some of that shit to y'all.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. And yeah, totally can see that as far as like um, people like me who are just starting to get a grasp of what Malcolm X preached and what he understood, may be a little bit confused about like the difference in like the perceived difference between his pre and post Mecca message. But that I'm excited today that people in the chat who may have done a little bit of reading, a little bit of study, like myself, um, can maybe learn a little bit more about that, understand the
Indeed.
dialectic.
Mhm.
All right. Hey, Conrad Ronan. Hey, Elijah. I'm gonna because we have a special guest TN Spitting on. I'm not gonna be talking to the chat too much. I don't want to be ignoring my guest, but I'm just very happy to see all of y'all. Thank you so much for coming. So yeah, let's get started. Before I start, I do love that center picture of Malcolm X with the rifle. I think that's just the most badass picture. I've always really liked that. Um, so okay, like I said a minute ago, how this presentation is set up is that we're going to discuss topics from his autobiography, and rather than giving a total overview of the life story, we're going to try to discuss some of these ideas. But along the way, we are going to talk a little bit about his life as well. And because Malcolm X was alive during a time of many diverse thoughts on Black liberation, we'll discuss some of his ideas in context with some of the other thinkers of the time and with some of the other movements of the time as well.
Sounds good.
The Let's see. Elijah says, "Do you think Malcolm X had a more radical Marxist direction before his death?" That's one
I
for
think
you, TN.
I think that will be extremely clear as we wrap up. That
Sounds good. So hold tight, Elijah. Don't sign off before you get the message. Um, all right. So let's just get right into it. And some of these I set up to be a little bit bombastic, so my comrade TN here is gonna call me out a little bit, I think. But yeah, one of the things that that I felt like when I was reading is that time and again, not that this was an opinion that Malcolm X had, but rather his life experience showed him again and again that every white person that he interacted with was in some way racist. That not necessarily every single one was ready to, join the Klan, but rather that they betrayed their internal racism to him in some way every time until he went to Mecca and experienced a different kind of a different kind of white person. And so what one thing that I kind of got from that pre and post Mecca thing is that it is the problem is the concept of whiteness, and in particular this American concept of whiteness, and that even these people who claim to be allies, because they have not addressed their own whiteness, end up being terribly racist. Uh, the prime example from the book that I remember is him talking to a hippie, and the hippie just loved hanging out with him and all of his friends, and was always trying to smoke weed with them and stuff. And one day because this was in the time when he was selling, and one day uh, a white girl came, and the mind you, the hippie had been actively trying to date black girls in this area for a long time. But this white girl came, and the hippie leans over to her and says, "Hey, why are you throwing yourself away with these people?" Talking about dating dating a black person. That's not exactly what he said, but that's more or less what he said. And I was just, I mean, I wasn't too shocked because I know this kind of person. But it was fascinating to me that all the way back in the early '60s, I guess, I forget when exactly this book was written, but um, that he was calling out so much of what they talk about in critical race theory right off the bat, and that the concept of socialized racism and inherent racism, even among people who consider themselves to be anti-racist, is pervasive. So I don't know. I wanted to get your opinion on that. If you feel like that's really what Malcolm X was saying, but also what your take is on the issue of the topic of that.
okay. Let me just make sure I'm understanding your question more before I could you just kind of
Repeat
rephrase
that.
your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reading too much Lenin lately, so I'm stringing 4 or 5 sentences together at once.
No, you're good, comrade. You're good. I just want to make sure I don't misrepresent what you're asking.
Sure. So what I'm saying is, do you feel like, uh, or not? Do you feel? Let me rephrase that. Um,
Hmm.
what is your impression on um two things? One, Malcolm X's position on the inherent racism of white people, but
Yeah,
two, your own position on the inherent racism of white people.
for sure. Well, you'll find my position on racism and Malcolm's position on racism are very much in lockstep and interlinked. So, Brother Malcolm very much did hold that all white people were racist. And, obviously, you got your white liberals who hear that and they get taken aback and they, think of themselves as like, well, I'm a good white liberal. How can I possibly be racist? I volunteer at X and I'm like for the Black Lives Matter and, I have a Black Lives Matter flag in my protest. So, in my yard and shit, because as if that horse shit means anything at all, right? So, what you have is a system that is very much built on racism. When I'm talking about this system of capitalism that itself is built on a system of imperialism, right? And what does that mean? Now, imperialism necessarily means that you are the foundational tool to try to promote the infinite growth that capitalism strives for, but that is itself impossible. So when you think about it from that perspective, then you start saying to yourself, "Oh, okay. Well, if infinite growth is impossible, how can we have the most growth that's possible in this world?" And you end up engaging in imperialism. But what do you have to do to engage in imperialism? You have to go ahead and literally exploit the rest of the world. You have to dominate, colonize, and steal from everybody else. So then, what ends up happening to justify that, you do shit like the Yellow Peril, you do shit like the Red Scare, you do shit like the propaganda that happens against black people here in this filthy fucking country, you know, and you literally spend your entire life uh, having consent manufactured for you. You don't even give the consent. The consent is manufactured on your behalf, and then you just freely give it. When the propaganda starts being more overt, and at, it's nothing to you. So then, when a brown person in the global south, a brown person here in this country, is undergoing some sort of brutality, exploitation, it's nothing for you to feel like they deserved it because of the propaganda that's being pumped in your head. So now they've artificially created a system where you, as a white person, who all of this shit is supposedly meant to benefit, cannot help but be racist because the very system itself is doing that to people and making them racist. So when Brother Malcolm's talking about that, he's already getting at this idea that just being white in a system that is global and that is built on racism means that you can't necessarily divorce yourself from being racist. Now, he wasn't necessarily mentioning imperialism in the very technical terms we're mentioning it, but this is the relationship to it. So now, tie it back to a person here in America. What are they supposed? How does that benefit the white person in America? Well, their social programs have to be funded by this imperialism. Stuff like, you know, the disproportionately white Social Security when they were first doing that. Stuff like the disproportionately white Medicare program when they first were instituting that shit. These things are funded materially, so they are also needing to be uh, funded through the materials imported, from the imperialistic and colonial projects of the global South. So, as a result, any white person who understands that or doesn't even engage with it is racist by default, simply for the fact that they are engaging in this system that requires them to be sustained by killing, exploiting, subjugating, and enslaving black and brown people, all over this globe. So it's not only the truth that it's all white people are racist when you understand it from this dialectic, but it's not even really a deniable point, is it?
No, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And it reminds me of the dialogue that I've had recently about the police and about capitalists both, where if you're going to be actively hurting people, if your job is to hurt people, right, as the capitalist job is to squeeze people and to make their life miserable, put stress on them so that they do not revolt, right, the police's job is to beat people and physically hurt them. um, and to continue in that job, if you continue to be a police officer, or if you continue to be a capitalist, you have to change. You become a worse person, or else you quit the job, or you fail. Right? If you're a capitalist and you don't exploit people, then your business goes away. So the act of being that, it's not that it attracts that kind of person, it's that the position changes you. And it's interesting to consider that perhaps that could be expanded to include white people, right? That if you are in any way taking part in the culture, right, then uh, by nature it turns you into a racist. um, so
Exactly.
uh, yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Exactly. That's a good point. But yeah, I was just sharing in the chat. Just living in material reality that we live in today. That's just the truth of it. You have systems that people try to infiltrate all the time that you can't change because that system going run like clockwork with or without you. And you either gonna get on board or you gonna get fucking stepped on, pushed aside, and replaced by somebody who will go ahead and push that shit. You had this Bernie Sanders motherfucker in here talking about, oh, we gonna end the wars, oh, we gonna fundamentally change America. Like, what you gonna do? Just, fund your Green New Deal on some Bolivian person's back, and just keep shit the same? Bernie Sanders was talking about ending the wars. He wasn't talking about ending imperialism and thus the racism that exists
Hmm.
in favor of white people all over the globe. So you know what I'm saying? It's you can't change the system, from the inside. You can only smash this system with a fucking hammer.
Yeah,
That's just the way
that's
it
right.
is.
That's right. What they say, communism is not love; it's a hammer to smash our enemies. I don't know if that's
I
a
think
true
it's love
quote.
too. I think it's love and a hammer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love you
Um,
so much. I smash you with this hammer.
yeah, that's right. Communist strikes again. The TN is wholesome as hell. But don't sleep on him. You can be wholesome and strong at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so getting to Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, um, we talked about this a little bit before we got on, and I think it's really important for people in the chat to understand some of the context of the um, the two of them and their relationship and their relationship to the movement for Black liberation, but also the way that both of them are treated in white media. Um,
Yeah.
so and including socialists, right? That I will say white media, including Twitter white media of white Twitter socialists having opinions on Dr. Martin Luther King as well as Malcolm X. So I don't know. Maybe we can step through the slide and then talk a little bit more about that stuff after.
That sounds good. Yeah.
So, Malcolm X originally called Dr. King's March on Washington the Farce on Washington. That was in his book originally, right? So, not necessarily or not saying that Dr. King's approach was farcical, but rather that many of the people who came, and especially some of the more opportunistic leaders, turned it into a picnic. That it didn't start with these big leaders. He said at the time, this idea of a march on Washington, where just like the black people of the country would get together and they would just go and create a critical mass in Washington and just see what happens. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
what are we going to do when we all get together and fight back for our freedom, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then Malcolm X says in the book that they told people to leave the signs at home, and they were given like the leadership that not Dr. King but other black leadership specifically were given money from these white organizations that funded like the signs that they were allowed to give out. So everybody, if you look at the pictures, everybody's got like the same fonts and stuff on the signs, and that's because they were all told to leave the signs at home and just use these. And so the signs that they were given were decidedly anti-revolutionary. So let's just talk about the March on Washington. Your perspective and how you think it went and what you think about like what Malcolm X is saying here.
Yeah, for sure. No problem. So I remember back in must have been November because it was the last Democratic debate before the election. So it must have been late October, not November. Uh, and the party and myself, we were downtown and we were organizing just to chaperone people, make sure they were safe, that they can get to the protest without any incident from the reactionaries that were crowding the area. And there was this really powerful anti-imperialist speaker, indigenous woman,
Hmm.
and she was like spreading a good, anti-imperialist and the wars and the exploitation, stop killing brown people, this system is killing us, we must overturn the system type message. And then she was followed up by a, well, no matter what you do, you got to vote for Joe Biden type liberal, which she was followed up by.
No.
That's who, and and it stuck with me in my brain because what it showed me, or at least was, I don't, it didn't show me shit. I was just reminded that you got people who colloquially kind of have the same goals, but there's strategies for how to get there, and show that there is like no solidarity, between certain people who ought to be working together toward one cohesive goal in order to actually have material gain in this world that we live in. So you'll have anti-imperialists over here, and you'll have, you know, Joe Biden is the answer people over here, and they'll
Right.
count themselves as part of the same movement. And I mean, this wasn't, mind you, a white liberal either that followed this indigenous person up. This wasn't a white liberal or anything like that. This was, a person who was a non-man and a black liberal,
Hmm.
and well, yeah, you can sympathize for why they just might have felt like, yeah, let's get Trump out of there. You can see the deep divide in messaging and how movements are often coerced, not coerced, but movements are often consisting of people who don't even share the same goals at all, trying to get a message out there. There's no cohesion. So then you march back to the what you call it, the March on Washington. Same kind of thing. It's called the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. But you got people out there who are just there to spread the message of black power. You got people who are out there to spread the message of economic freedom. You got people who are there, with messages that are good, but it's not one message, to focus on.
Hmm.
And so one person saying this, one person saying that, one person saying that, and you got a mess. And in chaos or community, where do we go from here? Dr. King writes about this, and he talks about how Kwame Ture during one of his speeches that Dr. King was meant to be like the keynote speaker for, or one of the protests that he was meant to be the keynote speaker for. Um, Ture wanted to coin black power. He wanted to get out there. He wanted to raise the black fist. He wanted to like really like consolidate behind this message of black power. And King was against that because he thought that the words black power might necessarily send like the wrong message, and you'd be bastardizing the media, and you would just end up doing more damage to like solidarity than you would any kind of benefit. And so as a result, there was like a bit of a split between Kwame Ture and Dr. King, and what ends up happening is they just decide to forgo chanting at all for the rest of the protest. That's the compromise that they ended up coming to,
Hmm.
um, thinking that, hey, this message is divisive, but you're my brother. We're comrades. We're not gonna like let this split us up. Let's just like we'll talk about it later. Let's just agree for no chanting, and then the media won't have anything to pick it up on. But as we know, that didn't stop the media from like going in on it anyways, talking about, oh, was this black power too radical? What about white power? That kind of shit.
Right. That
You know,
shit.
the media played its game anyway, and so what ended up happening is you start to realize the media is going to, cover your story, or a story the way it wants to anyways, regardless of what you do, and so you
Hmm.
cannot be compromising. Um, the image of your movement, based on like, oh, I'm seeking positive media coverage. I want to be portrayed in this light. By the time they picked up your shit, they already had a narrative for how they was gonna pitch that story, how they was gonna talk about you, and so you can't be out here trying to acquiesce to these people. These people are not your friend. They're not our comrades. They will quite literally uh, use whatever division is there to paint an entirely different story than what's actually going on the ground. And so, even something that's seemingly great as the March on Washington, which it was great, they had a lot of turnout to show the power of organizing. You're talking about 1 million people marching on the March on Washington, and yet it still got covered as divisive. King's numbers never rose
Uh,
above 50% in terms of favorability. It didn't do anything, to like give him more credibility, in terms of like whether people like him or not. There may have been small bumps here and there, but the overall narrative stayed the same. So the system is once again gonna get what it wants out of you, and it's gonna tell the story that it wants, um, one way or another. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. That's something that I didn't talk about very much in this because I didn't. It is obviously important, but it wasn't something particularly related to, Malcolm X's thoughts. But he mentions many times in the book how he will go through and discuss all of these ways that he and his community had been hurt by white people, and he would list instances. You know what I mean? And he would talk about how, you can't, how can you heal, like the knife thing, like if you stick a knife into me 9 inches and pull it out six, then that's not healing, right? And then what was striking to me was he would say that these people would come and they'd listen to him, and then they would just report basically whatever. They would just say, like, Malcolm X divisive again, Malcolm X, reverse racist, whatever they would say in the press. And it was almost as if they had not even been to the rally. They didn't hear him at all. So, yeah, as far as like the media spinning things, in ways that are divorced from reality, I feel like Malcolm X must have faced that his entire life.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's like the quote I put in the chat. These motherfuckers will quite literally have you spewing horse shit about the people and singing the praises of the media. Oh, look at the media giving fair and unbiased coverage. Look at this media who just calls shit right down the middle. Like,
Mm-hmm.
reality is not a 50-50 thing, my friends. It's just not. Oftentimes, the truth just leans heavily in one direction, one way or another. And, you might have a 50-50 case every now and then, but like the way the media is set up, you know, if these motherfuckers these days, CNN have been the big deal that it is now. Back then, these motherfuckers would have put David Duke and Martin Luther King on opposite sides and then said, okay, have a debate. You
Mm.
call it. You tell me who won. And if that's the case, why are these motherfuckers presenting your narrative in the first place?
Mm.
You know,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So that's how I feel about that. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So, just got a couple of quotes here. So, saying specifically, these are from Malcolm X. He says, Dr. King wants the same thing that I want, freedom. And I want Dr. King to know that I didn't come to Selma to make his job difficult. I really did come thinking I could make it easier. If the white people realize what the alternative is, perhaps they will be more willing to hear Dr. King. So, what alternative is he talking about, and what freedom is he talking about?
What alternative is you talking about? Pew pew pew, motherfucker.
Right, exactly.
you know, you what you have is a country, a state, an empire, if you will, that has built itself on a violence. It sustains itself on violence, and it literally has to engage in exploitation, imperialism, propaganda, not only uh, to continue to get the gains materially that it wants for itself, so that it can continue to enrich a few oligarchs, but also so that it can keep pulling the wool over the eye of the people who live inside the imperial court.
Mm,
This is why you get so many people who are so deathly ignorant to what's going on outside this country. So you got somebody like Brother Malcolm who says, "Look, you give me a platform, and I'm going to be exposing, things that are going on not only here in this country, but are going on all over the globe." There was a time when Dr. King just wasn't really talking. He wasn't as concerned with global solidarity as he shouldn't be, and where Dr. King always had this Pan African standpoint in mind. So he'll give speeches about things that are going on in Africa, things that are going on in Asia, etc. And he'll be pulling the and he'll be he'll just be pulling the curtain from out underneath these motherfuckers and letting folks know, like, hey, this is the kind of shit that is going on, from your so-called, democratic nation.
mm,
So if you give me a platform, I'm going to expose some of this shit. I'm going to quite literally let what your democracy is built on. Or you can give this person over here who isn't, you know, challenging the imperialist question, challenging the colonial question as much, uh, who has some reasonable demands, a platform, acquiesce to them, and maybe we can negotiate along those lines. You
mm.
tell me, it's one way or another, y'all motherfuckers gonna give us what we want. of if you're gonna let me do it my way or if you're gonna get this motherfucker his what he wants and we're gonna do it their way. But this wheel's gonna turn. So you know, they tried to play ball with Dr. King until, of course, Dr. King became a person very much concerned with international solidarity, pulling the
Mm-hmm.
wool out from under the fucking wars, calling horse shit on Vietnam, talking about integrating his people into a burning house, and challenging the colonial question. And then, bam, you know, here comes James Earl Ray, supposedly. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
it,
it's interesting you say that quote about integrating into a burning house because that is exactly what I mean. That's a quote that's very similar to something Malcolm X said, right? So as far as talking about the difference in their messages, it's almost verbatim. Sometimes they line up, right? Um, so yeah, we got some interesting things going on in chat right now. Uh, so um, yeah, what do you? Let's talk about modern white leftists and Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
let's not talk about white modern leftists and like save ourselves all the fucking headache. How about that? No, let's talk.
All right, we can skip that if you like, TN. There's no problem.
No, let's talk about it. We'll continue on.
Well, yeah, just I would just like to hear your opinion on how both of these men are, um, misquoted and or misrepresented by the settler socialist.
All right. Well, yeah, you got these white leftists who are quite literally, they distort reality all the time. I mean, these are the kind of motherfuckers who are out here trying to tell you that nobody in the world is building socialism. So already you could just dismiss their opinions as horseshit because they're already not engaging, with the world.
Yeah.
But these are the peace and love type folks who, try to say stuff like, "Oh, Dr. King just had this beautiful dream of us just all coming together, and if we just come together, everything is going to be okay." Which, sounds perfectly lovely, on its head, at its surface, without pulling it out and really analyzing it. Oh, peace and love and solidarity and unity and everything's going to be okay. That's fine, but like, what does that even mean?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what is freedom? For the Marxist? What is freedom? For the colonized person? Well, it looks like decolonization. But what does colonization looks like? What does freedom look like? What does getting yourself out from under the boot of the colonizer, the capitalist, the imperialist even look like? It looks like fundamentally uprooting the very structure that these white leftists don't actually have any fucking desire to overturn at all because they benefit from it. This is why you got motherfuckers calling themselves leftists, but they're really fucking liberals who are going under the banner of social democracy. They say stuff like, let's do bourgeois reform. Let's do electoral politics. Let's do, peaceful protest. Let's do stuff like general strikes because a general strike is going to like change things in this country and it's going to get us in the right direction. But is it though? Like, what does a general strike even do? Is a general strike something that can fundamentally change America, or is it really just a tool? You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
I'm
That's a
gonna
good
fall
point.
on the. I'm gonna fall I'm gonna fall on the latter. It's a tool. What does a general strike really do for me, for you, for the folks in the chat, for the colonized people of the world, and for the communists who want to see global communism win? It poses a question, right? It poses a very simple question, and that question is, who really has the power here? You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Whose foot is really on whose neck? You know, and it's mine, and it's yours, and it's the working people's on these capitalists' neck. But it doesn't get us anywhere in terms of liberation. But what it does is it gets us having a very important conversation that we're not having now. So you start to look at Dr. King and you start to look at Malcolm X, and they started saying the kind of stuff that was eventually going to lead people to asking that very question. What happens when you get people talking about the Vietnam War is horseshit? We're being integrated into a burning house. Actually, not only are white people not all awful, but you know there are some people doing the work of decolonization all over the globe. There are people out here working in solidarity with brown people, yellow folks, Asian folks. whoever you want to say they're working with, these people are working in solidarity in every country, but this one, especially when it comes to people in the global south. So how can we allow these people to live? If that's the case, these motherfuckers are talking about a message that's quite literally going to turn this country on its head. So we got to take them out. It's you can see how things are going to go very clearly when you hear certain leaders get a little bit too much popularity and too much of a platform and start saying certain messages. This is why you got people with so big a platform who are quite literally just never going to toe certain lines.
Mm.
Uh, you know, it's Bernie Sanders, most popular politician in America right now. He'll still say free and fair elections in Bolivia, even though they've had like five free and fair elections since since the motherfucker first came to power. He'll
Yep.
still say Maduro is like a brutal dictator, that kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So like these are the kind of things that Brother Malcolm, Dr. King, they were around. They'd be like, well, who the fuck are we calling a brutal dictator? Who the fuck are we calling a fucking uh, what kind of elections are we undermining? We can't even get this so-called Democratic Party to just let a primary play out, fairly in this fucking country. Let alone get represent the Democratic will of the actual fucking people, which at the time was with this Senator Sanders. But even if Senator Sanders had won, you would have seen nothing would have fundamentally changed because this motherfucker wasn't out here trying to challenge the military-industrial complex in any way, not in
Right.
any kind of substantive way. And the exploitation, the imperialism would have gone on. This is why it's insulting when people try to put this motherfucker in the same breath as some of these radical leaders from the past that literally got assassinated for being too much of a threat. But anybody's trying to kill Bernie, they're like, it took a phone call. It took a phone call to like to undermine his threat. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
He ain't a
Like,
threat. I mean, that's so true. The fact that his whole shit could be upended by a single phone call just shows how it was never a threat. Damn, I never thought about that. They had to kill some of these leaders. I mean, they legitimately, we can say that like they're people, especially in the Black liberation movement from the this time on, like all the way to today, we can say that like the reason that they do what they do is certainly because of the revolutionary potential of the black community and the just how y'all been treated for 400 years. So
that's how it is. So you gotta these motherfuckers ain't the same. I'm gonna just put it like that. These motherfuckers ain't the same. These AOCs, these Bernie Sanders, these squads. I'm not gonna say they're not bad good people. They probably okay people, perfectly lovely motherfuckers. But you know, uh, it's a once again, even to the extent you want to change the Democratic Party, and it never happened. The Democratic
hmm
Party gonna change you 1,000 times over before you ever even get close to changing the Democratic Party. It's not the way. These motherfuckers laugh at your threat. They make phone calls about your threat, probably over brunch with other motherfucking reactionaries,
right.
or ordering margaritas and shrimp tacos and shit. They'd be like, yeah, like dead this motherfucker Bernie Sanders campaign. This motherfucker, get him out of here. Put somebody else up there. It's
Oh
that fucking
no.
easy.
Yeah, I mean, trust God, it's terrible to think about, but yeah, it's so true.
I'm
Oh
telling you.
shit. Um,
They couldn't shut me up with no phone call. I'll tell you that
no,
much.
right. I mean, that's the truth, ain't it? I mean, that was the thing that always got me. I mean, I hate to spend too much time talking about Bernie of all people, but um, the thing that got me the most about it was how they they were threatening to keep the polls open and demand people vote in person, and like that kind of seemed to be the thing that like convinced Bernie to quit. And I was just like, Bernie, if you truly believe, if you really in your heart believed that universal health care saved all the millions of lives that you talk about, then you wouldn't let them strong arm you like this. You know what I mean? Like you'd put up more of a fight no matter what they did. You wouldn't take that burden on and say, okay, well, I don't want you to do that, so I guess I'll just lose. You know what I mean? Like, how much do you really believe?
I mean, and we can move on after this point,
Sure.
but see, Bernie, he was talking this solidarity message. This will you will you fight for somebody that you don't know message, which I, by the way, think we should co-op and use that message because this idea of fighting for somebody you don't know is absolutely a good message. Problem is, this motherfucker wasn't gonna do shit for no goddamn body. But like this idea of solidarity, right? What was he trying to build solidarity based on? He was trying to build it based on like raise the wages, Medicare for all, tuition free college, decent little policies, stuff that I would probably support. I think are okay. Things I did support. I worked for Bernie. I had dinner with Bernie probably two or three. Not more, a lot more than I care to admit. And these issues are not unifying issues. These are not the kind of
Mm.
issues that bring people together, which is why he was perfectly comfortable advocating on them. What are the two issues in this country that have always been able to successfully and in a sustained way get people out organizing together with people they don't know, that they don't understand, um, all across the history of this country? There are only two, and it's the labor movement and it's the anti-war, anti-imperialist movement.
Hmm.
That's it. But ain't nobody calling right now for a mass restructuring of the union laws to push unionization and rebuild labor.
Huh.
Ain't nobody calling for for building workers' councils and then running radicals through those workers' councils so that they can build leadership and build dual power with the labor movement and the industrial movement like they did in the USSR and had a successful revolution. Ain't nobody talking about ending the global exploitation. Ain't nobody talking about ending the disastrous trade deals to the extent that it was actually substantive. I mean, they'll talk about reforming trade deals, but only in a way that you can do a softer imperialism, never in a way that actually makes it so that these global South countries have it on the, have a fair shake when they're talking about negotiating at the so-called negotiation table, which there is no negotiation table at all. It's the global North putting a boot on the global South and they can say, take this deal or we'll bomb you to all fucking hell.
Yeah.
So, when you get people organizing on these things, people do come together. But ain't nobody calling for that right now. The only people calling that for that right now are people who would literally never have a chance to get on any kind of national platform. People like Lariva, people like Baraka over in the Green Party, motherfuckers like that. Talking about anti-imperialism and rebuilding labor. But these are the tasks of our time. And none of these mainstream Democrats, not AOC, not Bernie, not Ilhan Omar, not Rashida Tlaib,
Hmm.
not Jamal Bowman, they're not calling for the shit that actually builds working class solidarity and bridges all gaps. I mean, how much history do we have in this country to prove that's what does it?
Wow. I never thought about that. I mean, I'm shame I never thought about that, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Popular policies don't build a mass movement.
No, no. Only the kind of things that connects workers from everywhere can do that shit, and that's anti-imperialism, and that's anti-war, and that's labor. Because I'll tell you, one two things motherfuckers got in common: we work, and we don't want our people that we love very much dying in some bullshit war.
It's true. So true.
you know,
Damn. Um. Okay. Cool. Yeah. You. I think you called it. Let's go. Let's go to the next slide because there's a ton to talk about still. But Uh.
I got you,
The
comrade.
plight.
I go nowhere.
The plight of the American black man. The American black person has, has a question of like, what are they supposed to do? What are you supposed to do to get your freedom, right? And so there are a lot of things that I felt like as I was reading the book, I was like, Malcolm X definitely understands the dialectic, even if he doesn't discuss in particular like in particular messaging of like, this is the dialectic of Marx, right? He does understand the idea of like, the dominant and non-dominant sides of a contradiction, and that two ideas in contradiction are oftentimes the thing that you should pay the most attention to, not single ideas by themselves, but rather the contradiction itself. And that the moment of change is more important than the static. And so he oftentimes would present these kind of dualities, these ideas of to contrast between the two. So um, not that black separatism and black nationalism are a duality, but rather some of the other ones, like the ballot or the bullet, and like organizing specifically with all black organizations that have no white donors or white members, and then integrated organizations, and then looking at um, dedicated Muslim for him, dedicated Muslim organizations versus looking at pan faith organizations, and like how to consider them uh,
Yeah.
together is important, right? Not to just talk about one by itself. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I would love to, just I just want to riff off that and some like just kind of talk through some of the ideas, on the slide.
Yeah, for sure. Can you just like synthesize a question so I can make sure I'm answering?
ask a question. Yeah. So okay, let's start with black separatism and black nationalism. Is black separatism and or black nationalism necessary for black liberation? Um, is there a place for uh, is there a place for that in any decolonization type discussion? And is it something that black people are still trying to figure out?
uh, is there a place for black nationalism in a decolonization discussion? Is there room for oxygen in the lungs of the human being we used to breathe? you know,
Right.
um, these things are fundamental to each other. There is no decolonization without a joint, unified African people fighting on behalf of each other based on the messages of radical love, decolonization, revolutionary kindness, shared territory, which is a part of the national question, and then building and sharing our shared culture. There is no communism to be built in a world where radical revolutionary black nationalism is not front and center, at the head of our organizing efforts in the same way that the indigenous separatist movements of all countries, including this filthy fucking country that you and I live in and call home, would be at the forefront. So that's kind of how I come down on that question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know, comrade. Truth is, I just wanted to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, because I'm gonna put it like this: when you talk about black nationalism, you talk about global solidarity, for all displaced Africans everywhere. We're not just talking about, you know, the black American. We're talking about, the black English person, the black Frenchman, the black, Cuban, the black Venezuelan, the black Nicaraguan, etc. Any black person anywhere at all who has it in their heart uh, to build communism, to build a socialistic project that can see all of our people liberated and the working people elsewhere liberated. Because we obviously stand in solidarity with our LGBTQ comrades who are marginalized, and we stand in solidarity with our non-men comrades who are marginalized. And it starts with building a movement based in solidarity and a shared understanding that we have to have our own nation, we have to have our own people and community together, building toward the project. And, there's obviously a number of strategic areas uh, in which something like that would be beneficial if we could ever succeed at building it. But yeah, the necessity of it is, and I'm not gonna talk strategy on a fucking stream. They'll kill my black ass tomorrow. But
Sure, of course.
but yeah, it's of the utmost importance, my friend. Yeah.
Honestly, appreciate that. So, the concept of the ballot or the bullet is very interesting because some people I was reading uh, that
Yeah.
this is something that he actually started saying more after he came back from Mecca, and
Yeah.
it's funny because it's oftentimes it's not talked about in conjunction whenever people craft the narrative of like the quote unquote reformed Malcolm X who wanted to work with white people, right? they oftentimes, when I've seen it presented as like this is early life, but no, it's the opposite. So I just wanted to hear like what does he mean by the ballot or the bullet? You know, what is he talking about here?
Oh, well, it's either we get electoralism or we get with what we want through pew pew, motherfucker. So I mean, listen, in this country's history, um, all radical change was achieved through some engagement with violence on behalf of
Mm,
colonized people. Uh, the Civil War, which ended up resulting in something like the Emancipation Proclamation, bloody and violent. Let me get the statistics. How many people died in that conflict? Civil War deaths. Uh, it must have been well over 1 million fucking people. Uh, Civil War deaths. And shit. Do you know that shit off the top of your head,
I
Conrad?
thought it was 250,000, but I might be wrong. Hold on, let me.
618,222. That's what we
Wow,
got right now.
damn. All right.
618,222 people died in the Civil War. And that's the war that had to be waged for black people to get off the fucking plantations. You talk about progress through the Jim Crow era in the 60s, in the 50s. You had Dr. King, doing nonviolent protest in terms of the response, but there was nothing nonviolent about what the state was doing in response to what even King was trying to do. There's nothing nonviolent about that shit.
Mm,
Uh, Hell, if anything, the violence from our end was in demonstrating to the people what these motherfuckers are out here trying to do to us to keep us from trying to
mm,
have any meaningful progress at all. There's nothing peaceful about Medgar Evers, Emmett Till, uh, James Meredith, and our Jewish comrades who died during the Freedom Summer of 1963 and 1964 in Mississippi, at the hands of the fucking Klan. There's nothing peaceful, excuse me, about that shit. There's there was nothing peaceful about the Vietnam War protests that eventually saw us get pulled out of Vietnam. Kent State, Jackson State, which is a lesser known one, but read about it. That was just as bad as what happened at Kent State in terms of the Jackson State shootings. Uh, there's no peace to be had, peacefully because they're not sustaining the current status quo with any kind of peaceful means. So when you talk about the ballot, yeah, use the ballot if it worked. But I pose to you, rhetorically, of course, when the fuck has the ballot ever worked?
yeah, that's That's wild. I mean, that's something that I think even I was listening to some of Malcolm X's speeches, and he even said that he said this is the first time in our nation's history that that it might be possible for change to happen, with the vote. In his famous "The Ballot or the Bullet" speech, I mean, listening to that speech broke my heart because I was like, yeah, he believed in giving white folks a chance, right? He believed in trying to help things through peacefully, as in like help things through without the deserved black violence that could come. And what happened? He got killed for it.
Exactly. So at a certain point, you just got to ask yourself, what kind of fool am I to bring, you know, uh, a raised fist to a gunfight? You know, like yeah, it's all well and good when the shit is fuckers trying to negotiate with you peacefully when everybody's trying to just talk and have a discussion and facilitate areas of agreement. But when a motherfucker quite literally means to end you, it's on you to end him first.
Right.
That's just what it is, and take your freedom by force if necessary. I would love nothing more than for the democratic socialists to be the ones who are correct about how we can achieve liberation and revolution. I don't want to see not a drop of blood shed from my comrades, but I'm not a fucking idealist, Brother Malcolm was not an idealist. By the end there, certainly, Dr. King is not an idealist. The material reality is somebody's gonna have to fucking bleed to get anything worth fucking happening
Mm.
or having in this world. And Right now, it's us, but it doesn't have to remain that way.
Mm, awesome, thank you. Let's talk about the different kinds of mass movements, but specifically talking about all black organizations versus integrated organizations, and the benefits of one or the other, and if you feel like, or let's just say benefits of one or the other, and if it is necessary to have all black organizations to this day.
Yeah, for sure. Just as much as it's necessary, for me to have, black leftist Discord groups where I don't have to deal with no white bullshit. It just is kind of what it is. You got black organizations that obviously uniquely understand the problems of black people and don't have to really uh, get too much involved in explaining our problems and why it's necessary to get out and do the work to to non-black people. Yeah, that's necessary. Now,
Mm,
your big tent orgs are obviously useful. There are people who the big tent philosophy uh, appeals to. More power to them. But um, it should have never been the case that we had all these fucking parties in the first place to deal with in order to try to fucking build something. But this country is obsessed with its useless fucking options. 50 fucking beans at the grocery store, 50 fucking brand, flavors of bread. How many goddamn brands of fucking tennis shoe that you go when you go to the fucking Foot Locker. You know what I'm saying? So
yep.
it should be no so fucking surprise that you got you know million goddamn orgs you got to choose from. DSA, CPUSA, PSL, etc. But it's fine. It is what it is. We just have to have coalitions, but that means you have to have a coalition of people of organizations that like broadly represent the different interests of the different people that live in the country, and if they can work together in solidarity, we can have everything there is to have.
Yeah, right on, right on. I was thinking about that the other day of like, ain't it wild that we have all these communist organizations in the United States and we don't have one coalition organization made up of these communist organizations? Like we we talk about so often, like, bringing in communists and anarchists together, but within the organizations that we have in the United States, we can't even bring ourselves together. So like, I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Of like,
Mm-hmm.
people have been calling me divisive for saying that it's okay to start a cadre rather than joining a big org. But I don't know. I say they're divisive because they can't even start like one summit a year where they get together. There is no, American National Convention of Communists. Um,
Boy, I'll tell you the truth. We don't even. Okay, I'll give you a bit of a hot take.
all right.
We, at this point, don't even need to be focusing on trying to win any more white socialists and white communists into our orgs. We can focus on getting the marginalized folks who are ready to like organize towards something real in this country, and take the white folks along with us who are already there, and then later on let white folks who like what we're doing as we're putting the work into action come along as well. But in the United States of America specifically, if you are going to wait on white people to be ready for revolution and to be ready to organize in favor of decolonization, it's a system that builds them, that benefits them most, you are going to be waiting forever. It's never going to happen.
Hmm.
You are not going to get white people en masse, pre-revolution, um, to agree to destroy whiteness, destroy white supremacy, decolonize this planet, end imperialism, and work toward the global solidarity of all people when white people as a whole have been made to sit at the top of the power structure and have been propagandized to appreciate their place on top of that power structure. Now, that doesn't mean the white socialists who already exist can't do good work, but it's not worth my energy, your energy, or anybody's energy to center trying to build any more new white socialists. What you can do is just do general education about our cause. Communism, political theory, mutual aid, etc. and anybody who it attracts is who it attracts. You know what I'm saying? You can build. You should build with anybody who wants to build. But targeting any group of white people, it's not worth your time. You just you get who wants to come, from those communities, and then you go into the communities of marginalized folks who want to hear the message versus white communities where they might colloquially be interested in the message, but it's never going to mean anything to them because they're not the marginalized people of the world. They don't understand their place uh, as a oppressed worker. They don't understand all the different intersections. The motherfuckers are still too busy, you know, crying about identity politics rather than just analyzing, identity politics from a Marxist perspective and like ridding themselves into liberalism. So, all solidarity to the white comrades who are principled about this shit, but we don't necessarily need to focus on any other white folks who um, would just rather be reactionary or settler socialists. Fuck them. That's how I feel about it.
Right on. A strong message. I I tell you though, it's funny, TN, the number of times a day if I say something about communism will win or whatever, I don't get anybody in my mentions. If I say something about we have to center decolonization in our communism or else we will lose, I get 35 mentions of like, well, what about class? Have you considered not alienating the white working class? And it's always like, I can see I can see exactly what you're talking about just in these interactions with people who, they're lost. They're
Yeah,
adrift at sea.
and I'll tell you what, you can't alienate no sincere socialist.
Mm,
Like how you gonna alienate somebody who sincerely wants to decolonize this world and actually be in solidarity with every other human being on the planet? There is no taking that from somebody. You either want it or you don't.
yeah.
And you're gonna do what you gotta do for that. Brother Malcolm talks all the goddamn time about what you're gonna be willing to do for freedom. You get a motherfucker telling you what is and isn't okay to do in the name of freedom, and then you got a motherfucker who don't really care about freedom.
Mm,
You know,
yes.
anything is any price for the freedom that you and I and the comrades in the chat and everybody else um, can get has to pay for freedom is a price worth paying because once we get it, it ain't going nowhere.
Mm,
It ain't going nowhere. So yeah.
oh yeah. Right on. Um, one last thing on this slide, the idea of Muslim versus pan faith organizations and just the place of the church in our organizations. I think that perhaps things have changed a bit, but many things have remained the same since the time of life of Malcolm X. But um, I often see a lot of discourse on Twitter about the place of the church in the movement and if the church is reactionary or not, and and many people specifically talk about the white church because there is a significant reactionary part to the white church. But yeah, I just wonder your perspective on the place of the church in the movement.
I would I would ask who built socialism without reactionary elements. Uh, there were no
That's a good
who the
point.
fuck, you know the peasants in the USSR were certainly reactionary uh, and very religious in their character. So were elements of the Cuban Revolution. So were elements of every revolution that ever kicked off. You are look. I don't want a movement that um, is full of people that are going to do any kind of harm to our LGBTQ comrades, our marginalized comrades, in any kind of way, shape, or form. But there are issues, that we can organize behind, and there aren't, and we agree on it, and we'll organize on that. And then when there comes issues where there can't be any agreement at all, we will take a hard line on that. But we are not in a situation where we can afford to say, you don't agree with me on this, so I won't organize with you on anything.
Mm,
It's not gonna fucking happen. So yeah, there are reactionary elements in the black fucking church, but like for Jesus fucking Christ. Donald Trump got elected in this fucking country. So I don't want to fucking hear anything from anybody about like what we ought to be willing to do and who we ought to be willing to work with, toward the global liberation of all marginalized people. Yeah, whether you like it or not, there are going to be some, reactionaries that you end up fighting on behalf of too, and it is what it is. And let's not talk about reactionaries like they can't be pushed. I've been a reactionary at some point in my life.
Mm.
I used to have I used to in college when I was 21 years old. And if this leaves this chat, I will end every single one of you motherfuckers. But I tried to get a YouTube talk show off the ground called Be the Light that was literally about like reactionary Christianity and like spreading like this anti-gay agenda and spreading
Oh,
this. Yeah, I was on that bullshit, and like this came from a place where most of my teens I was liberal as hell, like super pro LGBT. One of my best friends had been gay. Then I took like a hard turn right and was spewing toward that bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, I'm here admitting it to you, joking around with you about how embarrassed I am about it now, but like, that shit is fucking embarrassing. But if I can turn around and be an outspoken person who is willing to sit up here and tell you you have to be violently willing to defend your LGBTQ comrades, and if I can come from a place like that, unless you're talking about a literal fucking Nazi, there's nobody who can't eventually come to the right line on any given topic. It just depends on whether or not you're willing to put the right political education out there, push the right program, and take a hard stance. And then that phase for me didn't last more than like fucking I don't know a year, something along those lines. But it still fucking happened, and it was something that I had to like be deradicalized from, and I still find myself with leftover liberalism all the damn time.
sure.
But but TN, the kind communist, the Mr. Rogers Marxist version, that motherfucker's like knowing love today. That's not what you would have been thinking about of me, as if you had known me in 2012. So like it, and that's a message everybody understands, that everybody changes, everybody's been to someplace, and obviously, I don't have fucking Nazism that I came all the way from, but we still all came from some horseshit place, and some of us didn't leave, and then some of us got to a better place, and we have to give that proper reverence to make sure that everybody's getting a fair chance um, to grow and to contribute to our cause of global liberation for the oppressed peoples of this fucking globe.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I think any white person in this chat would have to say that they have worked on some of their own um, internal bigotry and have also got plenty of leftover liberalism. So like, I might be queer, but you think I've never said an anti-black thing in my life? You know.
No, I'm gonna whoop your ass about it when I meet you too.
So yeah, we all got shit to work on. And, that's something we were talking earlier about Doja and Doja Bird, our friend, and one thing that I really try to pay attention to with her and that I try to learn about is this concept of um, the restorative justice, but applying restorative justice is more than not just as a template of rules to follow, but rather as like a lifestyle and a way of approaching ourselves and our world. And I really think about how you know people we have to find ways of communicating with people and helping them change. We don't have to wait around for them to change, like you say, right? There's no like waiting around for white people to get revolutionary. You'd be waiting until the heat death of the universe. But but
Longer.
but but the idea that somebody who's willing to change and is actively trying to change, that there's a place for that. And I'll never tell a white per I'll never I'm sorry I'll never tell a black person that they have to accept any kind of white person into any kind of movement. You know what I mean? I think that we've done plenty enough harm to y'all that we ain't got no right to say anything, especially to the people who don't want to organize with us at all. But on the other hand, I have to say that I'm grateful to the ones who are willing to work with us, knowing that we're gonna have some leftover bullshit that's gonna come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, hard agree. And you know, I've already come from a. I've had so much growth in my own life, especially since becoming a communist, where people like gave me like the mercy and the patience that I needed while I was overcoming my bullshit. Dealing with suicidal ideations, dealing with I've been dealing with that shit since I was 8. Dealing with the issues that I was dealing with the leftover reactionary horse shit, dealing with houselessness 3 times, all the horse shit that I fucking deal with. And now I'm like, probably the most positive communist that most people in our spaces fucking know. So
Mm-hmm.
I, um, you know, I can't find it in me to deny anybody the grace and the mercy uh that was extended to me when I needed to like get out of the like darkest places in my life. So like if a person, is sincere in their belief or in their desire to be better, to do better, to understand and to learn, we're not going to take it easy on them. We're not going to be soft on the motherfucker, but we're going to love on that person and we're going to try to help them learn. And we're going to help pull them out of that place because this this revolution is going to be built with people who we wouldn't have liked if we had met them at a certain time. But hell, y'all wouldn't have liked me 3 years ago. Some of the shit that I was up to.
True.
But I'm where I'm at. Where I am, I'm where I'm at when y'all met me. Other folks are gonna be where they're at when they met me. When I meet them, same with y'all. And if a motherfucker wants to be better, let's give them a chance to be better. Does that mean everybody's gonna get there? Fuck no. But like, there's gonna be a hell of a lot of people who do. And we have to give them a chance. Like we are not in the business of like, we should do more gatekeeping on the left, but not so much gatekeeping that we are not giving people a real opportunity, to grow. And
That
that's how I feel about it.
right on. That's awesome. Thank you, TN.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's get to the next one. Um, so I think we covered that pretty good. And this is something that this is something that he said in the beginning, and I should have reframed this to be more to say that this is what he had originally said, but that later on he did talk about it as very much that he considered it not to be the white man's religion anymore in a lot of ways, and that that true liberation, as like that liberation was absolutely sought by the black church as well. So we can just keep on going. This is something that I think. Okay, this is something that I think is. This is the one I'm going to have to ask your forgiveness on. I think. So, mostly just because not that I think anything in this slide is particularly bad, but rather I think it's worth discussing, and I hope I can discuss it in a way that is you know that isn't chauvinistic. But when I was reading about the Nation of Islam, specifically the way that he describes it in the book, the modern Nation of Islam and the group that he ended up breaking away from is perhaps different than the one that he helped build in the beginning. But as he was discussing the programs that they started in particular, I was very I was just floored in many ways. I thought it was amazing that these things that he talked about and the things that he was able to do. And I didn't want um, I didn't want to say that it all is religious, as in like I think that there were programs within the Nation of Islam that he put forward that we could use in a socialist project. So these are a couple of the things that I took from his description of the Nation of Islam that I thought are like things that really we should be doing too, that are that are not religious, but are a community building type idea. So specifically, He talks about the importance of discipline and self-respect. And the fruit of Islam, as he describes it, especially whenever he was building up the Nation of Islam, very much embodied that discipline and self-respect. They worked out together, they studied together, they were together all the time. And when one didn't just say that they were part of the fruit of Islam, they were kind of accepted into it. And it was quote unquote. One could say militant, but the idea is that it was just a strong show of self-defense. That the Nation of Islam was never out there being aggressive as such. They were simply saying that we will brook no foolishness. And I keep thinking about how leftist movements, even ones that are surrounding gun culture and the a lot of organizations that have you know that are about teaching uh, don't have some of the same discipline and rigid organization that the Fruit of Islam had. So
Yeah.
before I talk about the other programs, I wanted to ask, like, do is there a place for this? Is this something that we need to be actively working on, or is this something for the future as far as having these discipline in our groups and a certain kind of expectation of self discipline, self respect, and dedication to a cause.
Yeah, for sure. Man, uh, one of the things that I think happens to every communist that I have met is that they themselves come across people who have never like talked, to a communist. So all they have to go on as to who the communists are or what they learned, in history class, which in it, it's not gonna be good if that's where you're learning,
True.
your shit from, you know. But you have these as a response to that communists who now engage in just like having communism kind of be like their whole identity. Like, I'm a communist. That's who I am as a person. There's nothing else to me. You know, totally unrelatable to people. So you
Mm.
end up just not being able to reach people at all. You have to then respond to that in a couple of different ways. The first and foremost is, you have to actually build relationships, with other comrades. And I'm not just talking about in the organizing spaces. I'm talking about your comrades not just being your comrades, you know, being your friends too. The way you're my friend, the way Grim's my friend, the way James is my friend, for example, the way Chantilly is my friend, etc. These are not just you are not just people that I would organize with.
Mm.
You were people I would go out for pizza with, I would go out bowling with, I would hang out with you, I would talk to you about my life story. I would, listen to yours, and I would build community, with you folks, and you don't get to a point where you want to die for a person or are willing to die for a person rather that you don't like personally like.
It's a very fair point.
You know what I'm saying? You have to actually build that community, and then in doing so, spending the time, that's how you build the discipline. Because if you can build a relationship and endure all the kind of struggles that happen when you have like a friendship with somebody, a romantic relationship with somebody, you can sure as hell, then take that and extend those principles and how you learned and what you learned, you know, out to the people, out to the fields. So that's that part of it. Relationship building in a way that builds discipline and solidarity and love, revolutionary kindness with your comrades. But that's not all there is to it. Uh, a lot of these communists these days, they divorce themselves from the material world. So like they're communists and they engage in a lot of theory, but that's all they are. So they'll be out organizing and they'll be combative with the people. They'll be pushing
Mm.
back. They'll be kind of edgy. You know, great, great foundational or great theoretical foundation. Though they understand the theory, they understand that shit well. They can Mao, Lenin, Harry Haywood, Newton, all these motherfuckers. But no kindness, no love. no reverence to the people, no respect, no spirit of real actual servitude to the folks. So they're damaging the movement. So then what happens? Rather, you start to realize, well, fuck, I have to be more relatable to people more than just, oh, I'm the communist who understands a lot of communist theory and that's who I am as a person. No, you got to be like a person who, oh shit, that's X and they're interested in X and they do X. They be down at the community center, they be shooting hoop, they be doing all these different things. Motherfuckers on Twitter, they can get on there and they can tell you like, oh yeah, TN Spittin, that's a principal communist, but like, man, that motherfucker loves some Magic the Gathering. He got little stuffed animals, and he like pro wrestling, and he like anime. He got his little pin, One Piece post. Like yeah, I like spend some time with him and like some of those other hobbies, even when I like didn't necessarily agree with him about communism. And then in those spaces, like every now and then we talk more, and like that's how I got interested in communism. And now X is a communist, because all of a sudden, you know, you actually built community with them, related to the people, and just present it to them as like a real fucking person rather than as like this Marxist fucking robot, which is what a lot of fucking people present as. This is why motherfucking Marxists end up getting called LARPers so goddamn much.
It's
They
true.
over here
It's true.
engaging with the people, and not talking to them as real people. There isn't a single person in the houseless community in this fucking city that I don't know by name. I know every single houseless person in this city by name.
Damn, for
I
real.
know their story. I know what job they work. I know how old they are. I know I know how many kids they have. If they have any kids. I know what their plans are. I know what their material needs are because I actually organize with them, talk to them, have relationships with them, but not just that. Went bowling with them, bought them pizza, had ice cream, spent, got them a bus pass, got with them on the bus, talked to them on the bus, spent, got them down to the soup kitchen, fed them, had them helping me, feed other people, shit like that. This is the kind of shit, that you got to do. The kind of shit that gets you out in the community, serving, building, having fun with people, building friendships, building relationships. This is the real material realities that are going to get people, in community with each other. It's never going to be good enough to just be a communist. Like you have to be somebody that like motherfuckers want to be around, motherfuckers want to organize with, somebody that people want to defend. And these motherfuckers ain't that a lot of time. They're not awful people, but they're cutting themselves off from the people and they're not allowing themselves to develop in any other way than their theoretical foundation. So as a result, they're limiting themselves, from experiencing revolutionary love, revolutionary kindness, and ever even being able to give that out. And as such, hurting and poisoning the movement. We don't need more edgy white leftists. We need, kindness. We need love. We need sternness on the bullshit type of people who infiltrate our movements and more motherfuckers who are willing to see an anti-trans person and be like, hell no, if you come anywhere near my fucking comrade with the bullshit in a harmful way, I'll fucking end you.
Mm,
This is what we need. But we don't got that shit right now, but we sure as hell got to build it.
hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's hard. It's hard as fuck. And I mean, I'll try not to be too colloquial about this. I try not to make it just a me and you conversation, TN, because I don't want to, I don't want people to feel like they're just listening in on a phone call. I've been thinking about this thing, man, where it's like, you know, in the in the '90s, I had some friends who was organizers for ACT UP. So it was like the AIDS crisis was kind of ripping through the gay community, and there was a group that was trying to force the government to listen and to pay attention to what was going on and to actually start researching cures for AIDS rather than just trying to like literally kill all of the gay people. And
Yeah.
because it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was very happy to let gay people die en masse. Um, so so yeah, the thing was that the white folks um, would be speaking over the black or the non-white folks, and the non-white folks would be calling them out on it. The men would be speaking over the non-men, and the non-men would be calling them out on it. You know what I mean? And there was always this problem of like, especially with that particular situation of like, the lesbians were not getting HIV like the men were, for reasons that they found out later, related to the transmission of it. But when you have a meeting full of just white men talking about their problems, then a lot of times, because of white chauvinism, even if they are queer and even if they are being oppressed by the government, and the government's allowing them to die, then still that the white supremacy comes up, and my friend who was a big organizer with that, he's a uh, uh, he's just telling me that like the situation never got resolved. The contradictions never got resolved. It would always end up with the group eventually breaking up whenever the contradiction just got too big. And I don't know. I just worry about it constantly. I wonder, how do we combat that?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how you combat that. We're a very divided people already in this country. But I'll tell you what, though, uh, whatever the answer is, it's not gonna come without a focus on revolutionary kindness. It's not gonna come
Hmm.
without a focus on community building. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we will find the answers if we come together in community, in solidarity, in accountability. Answering to each other, building together, learning from each other, and then making sure that we're always looking out, for the people that we would call comrade. Because once a person calls you comrade, you have an obligation to make sure that you're looking out for that person, you're protecting that person. And like we got to stop, loosely just referring to any and everybody as our fucking comrade. That's a deep,
It's
you
true.
know, beautiful, meaningful relationship. And, I call people comrade that I would personally look at and say like, yeah, I'll struggle alongside you. I'll struggle for you.
Hmm.
Your cause is my cause. Your pain is my pain. I will share my bread with you. You know, and like a lot of motherfuckers aren't there.
Hmm.
You know, and it's only through revolutionary kindness and community that we're gonna get there. So no, I don't know the answer on how we heal that divide. Being honest with you, but I know the only way to find it is going to be coming into community to each other. And the only way to build community is through revolutionary kindness, openness, accountability, sternness too. And yeah, being willing to wield a big stick when somebody thinks they're going to come at our comrade sideways.
Right on. Awesome. Feminist Critique is rating right now with a party of 11. Thank you so much, Feminist Critique. TN, this is a good fellow streamer. A couple of people who talk about a lot of things from a feminist lens, and they stream basically every day. They're great people. They're fun to watch. They do stuff like talk about theory, talk about movie watching. So it's not all one thing. So yeah. Uh, Groomer just caught side of the rate. um, okay, so anyway, um,
Yeah.
yeah, so let's keep going. So let's talk about the addict-driven recovery program. I think that shit is fantastic. As somebody who's in AA myself, the way that they did it in the Nation of Islam is exactly how we do it. As far as like the benefit of one addict talking to another is without parallel. Where you gotta someone who knows your story and knows your pain is able to speak to things in a way that a quote unquote professional never could. And I think we should focus on that, like as in like I think that it's okay for different groups to be reaching out to each other, as far as like we have solidarity with each other, but I can talk to former addicts in a way that someone who's not an addict can't talk to. I think with unhoused people, someone who's been unhoused can talk to the unhoused communities in a way that other people can't, right? So I was just thinking, I was like, how do we have that kind of um, recognition of experience and the importance of experience in many different ways in our movement? How do we make sure that people are, not being blinded to the fact that our differences are ways of actually, they are strengths in many ways for, building the communist project. As far as the question in that, because I, I know I've been doing that to you all night. Um, how do you think we can use uh, experience, especially experience with difficult things like being unhoused or being an addict, to build the communist project? Why is our own personal experience important?
Well, yeah, well, as a former houseless person myself, I've been houseless 3 times. The only thing that allowed me to have all those relationships with the houseless people in the community now is the fact that they can relate to me personally. Yeah, you got a lot of motherfuckers out here trying to organize on their behalf, help them, and they appreciate that shit. But like a motherfucker who they could just sit with, have a beer with on the curb and just talk some shit about what it's really like out here, what's really going on, what's really needed, and what they don't got is important. So the importance of that is just making a person feel like, man, this person has been as vulnerable as I am. Therefore, it is okay for me to go ahead and be, vulnerable with them. Because they trust you. There's nothing we can do for our people if our people don't trust us. So different marginalizations and different experiences are going to lead to different people coming to trust us. In different ways. So I can build community a little easier with houseless people. Um, you can build community a little easier, with our addict comrades or our comrades who are former addicts, and that's okay. And now we have the tools, you and I and other comrades have the platforms to be able to use um, our experiences to build community around these specific groups if we wanted to, and we could, and we should. What's stopping me right now? From getting on Twitter and um, talking about my experience as a houseless person, which I have, and offering community to people in terms of like something like a Discord channel of formerly unhoused people who want to be able to share their insights and their uh, experiences as to like what they thought should help, what could help them, what would currently help in their community, and then also being able to do the same for current comrades who still have access to the internet. We have this internet and the social media horseshit as part of our current day material conditions that we could be using to do even more outreach. Yeah, there's nonsense on there, but there's always sincere people who are looking to help and be helped if we're willing to like be vulnerable first. So
Hmm.
we could. That's the kind of shit that we can do. That's why I insist that as horseshit as the Bird app is, we ourselves are still not using the Bird app to its fullest potential while
Yeah,
we while we still have to use it. And you know how I find the Bird app to be bullshit. We talk about it at nauseam, but you know,
it's so
um,
true. God damn,
there's
that's a.
so yeah, there's so much we can do. That our little Discord over there, Bread Theory, is 300 fucking people, comrade. That shit has existed since the end of October. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like it's not been that long. It's
yeah.
not been that long at all. We can do whatever we want. If we're sincere, if we're willing to put ourselves out there, and if we're willing to build a solid program that is forthright and honest, and we do that, and we can do whatever it is that we want to do, and that includes building community with all these different kinds of people being marginalized in society.
Mm, hell yeah, that's a good point. We. It's funny. We had been talking. A couple of comrades and I have been talking specifically about the idea of simply starting a little group online for you know um, former alcoholic comrades, so we can support each other and we can talk about things from the lens of of understanding that how much capitalism actually did influence our our using, that like it in so many recovery groups, when you go and you talk about like the problems that you face as a as a queer person, or you talk about the problems that the economic problems that you have, or you talk about race especially, there will be this there will be this kind of, oh, kind of like, oh, we talk about alcoholism here, we're not talking about like politics, quote unquote politics. And it's like, there's no such thing as separation from life and politics. If somebody is facing, police violence and shit on a daily basis, then they're just gonna have a different experience than me as a, me as a white guy, right? And I try. We talk about that, but it causes conflict sometimes. So yeah, I think sometimes having a place where, like you said, you have a Discord where you can go and talk to your black comrades away from white foolishness, while also having a maybe having a little place where we can go and talk to our other alcoholic comrades without dealing with the foolishness of the non-socialist alcoholic who wants to tell us how all of our problems are really personal problems, that we have to have a certain amount of strength and,
Personal responsibility.
yeah, personal responsibility. Exactly. Some bullshit.
I'm telling you,
So
you're gonna be personally responsible for sticking a foot up their ass or coming with that bullshit.
exactly. Um, and I think we talked about the you talked about the importance of community, and how you have to do things more than just um, more than just doing praxis together, that you have to actually be friends together. And I think that really is covered in the last part, as far as like doing some book study, doing some study about life skills and stuff, but also doing like socialization, and doing like fitness classes together. Like, yeah, that's this the kind of shit we got to start doing. And the pandemic makes it difficult, of course, but yeah, whenever it starts back up, like really trying to form a community and not just be like a club.
Exactly, exactly. The only way I was able to grow that Discord is because I was honest about what it was for. I was honest about where I was at my journey when I started the Discord, and then I was like, kind to people, and then I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, that Discord probably had like uh 20 people in it for the longest time, and then bam, it's 300 folks. My Twitter was, a couple thousand folks for the longest time. I mean, for fuck's sake, I was small enough to participate in no comrades under 1K, and now this shit is like, you motherfuckers have grown that shit to like 16.5K. You know what I'm saying? But like, that was only possible because of radical kindness, sincerity, um,
Yeah.
great fucking smile, you know, and just having like a real program that I believe in, that I'm willing to push relentlessly. Like, that's what we're lacking. Like, if you believe the shit, say it with your whole chest and
Mm.
stand on it. That's what gets motherfuckers to want to really fuck with you the long way and forever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
tell people that all the time, man. It's like the idea that we just gotta, like, we have to admit what we truly believe. We have to tell people who we really are, because people can tell. Like, they say, um, I, maybe this is Ave, so forgive me if it is, but like, real recognize real, right? The idea that,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So.
Real left, that's real, and these lefties on Twitter are looking kind of unfamiliar.
uh,
Yeah.
Thank you, Def Moodsy. Agreed. Solidarity with my comrades battling with themselves. I definitely understand that. Um, okay, so here's now that we're done with all the touchy feely.
We ain't never done with the touchy feely as long as I'm involved, motherfucker.
Once this was something that there's a section in the book that Malcolm X talks about how black people don't actually like hanging out with white folks, and I thought this shit was so interesting, because this was really a look into Malcolm X's mind, but also, like, I think looking into people's mind in a way that, like, it's true. He called it, especially about me, because he's like, white people think that everybody likes to hang out with them, and I'm like a golden retriever. I like everybody, and everybody, a lot of people like me. but yeah, I believe that like fundamentally, like part of that is me being a nice guy, but part of that is also very possibly a little bit of a little bit of whiteness that I hadn't examined. The idea that people would just naturally want to hang out with me, and that they like someone who had been oppressed by white people, like, oh man, they why are they angry at me? What's going on? It's like there's reasons why they're angry at you. There's reasons why they wouldn't want to hang out with you. You know. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I'm just gonna read this little bit, and I just love to hear your impression of like, um, I mean, I don't even know how to broach this subject, but just the idea that like, white people think that all races, all people just love them and want to hang out with them, and have no actual idea how black folks really feel about them, both on a social level and on a an individual level. And even these people of he calls them white people of goodwill, they still reek of arrogance, and so they'll never get a real thought out of a black person, right? He says that. And we'll talk about the integration thing in a second, but he specifically says, like, you will not know what a black person actually thinks. Like, a white person will not know because a black person will not tell them. And mostly it's because the white person don't actually care to know. But this idea that, like, white people think that they're getting the full self of a black person presenting them, but actually the black person is keeping themselves protected instead of showing their true selves because there's too much bullshit to deal with. Anyway, I'm interested to hear like is that still a thing? Do black people have a wariness around white people that white people do not recognize? Are white people oftentimes surprised by black people's feelings? What are your thoughts on that?
White people scared of their own damn shadow, so of course white people are out here scared about other black people's feelings. That's just what you expect to be here. White people out here, they can't get out their own damn way. They out here, shooting motherfuckers for quite literally existing. So
Mm,
to hear a motherfucker tell them verbatim to their face, like, yeah, you know, I don't fucking like you, and yeah, it's because your relationship to whiteness makes you a danger to me. Yeah, these motherfuckers is taking it back. They had taken it back by shit that's a hell of a lot less threatening than that shit. You know what
mm,
I'm talking about? So
yeah.
these motherfuckers, you tell them, yeah, a lot of what they say, it'd be funny as hell. They'll say stuff like, I think, black people who, just want to switch places with the white man and then, do the same kind of oppression and violence that we did to them and just get the get back. But it's like, look, motherfucker, I'm a communist. You know, Malcolm X was trending toward being a Marxist before they put a fucking cap in him. The same with Dr. King, most likely. Like, I don't want to kill you as an individual. I don't got no interest in killing you as an individual. I'm gonna go a step further. I'm going to destroy the institution of whiteness with my comrades. I'm going to do something that's going to make you so uncomfortable that you can't even fathom what it would be like if that happened to you. You know, you're going to have to start from zero. You're going to have to actually build a world for yourself, an identity for yourself, a construct for yourself that's based on a humanity that's not eroded the
Mm,
way white supremacy has eroded your humanity, eroded your ability to have a relationship with other people.
mm,
Like, no, so we're not going to kill you. Like, we're going to go a step further and kill your whole identity. We're going to kill whiteness. I don't got no interest in genocide in any individual white person. We're going to commit, the greatest act of love, that this material world we live in could possibly ever know. And that's stripping whiteness away, from white people, and eradicating the globe of it and leaving in its wake, white folks who are surrounded in community by folks who are willing to help them learn, who they are as individuals, reclaim an identity that is healthy, full of the revolutionary kindness that we believe in, divorced from colonization, excuse me, and in a way that they are forced to actually have to grow as a person and be in community with other folks. So, for the first time, you know, in the history of white people, and not, you know, as the primary, antagonist, of the planet that we live on right now. So yeah, motherfuckers are like, well, you gonna kill white people? Like that's fucked up. It's like, is that the worst thing we can do? No, we gonna do the worst thing we can do, and that's take, and that's take the whole damn thing from you. So yeah, if they scared of that, I don't know what to tell you. Fuck them.
Right on. Oh shit, Kenny's in the chat. Kenny says race is socially constructed. Whiteness was never constructed to be good. It was constructed to dominate. Its entire being continues to be maintained by various violences. Therefore, one must choose their whiteness or their humanity. You can't have both because of power. Abolish whiteness. Yeah. Right on. You know, it's funny. That friend I was telling you about before, and I'm actually going to bring him on sometime because he's a great comrade. But one of his nephews wrote this article called "Don't Talk to White People," and the whole idea in the article was that someone who considers themselves as white is what's important, and that the anybody can consider themselves as white in some ways, but he was saying specifically talking about people who look like me that the fact that they consider themselves as white, the fact that we consider ourselves as white, right, is one of the biggest stumbling blocks, and that like once we can like that post racial society where so many people say they don't see color or say they don't really consider themselves white or what, it's bullshit, right? That like many of those people absolutely do, and they're lying, and that but that getting to a place of actually rejecting whiteness is the only way that you can actually become less racist is kind of the thesis of this article. And I when I read it, I was just like, I was arguing with my friend because my friend was like, so he's like, so Gomer, he's like, you are on your way to, I mean, he said you don't consider yourself as white. And I was like I mean, but I do, right? Like how I don't understand how I can, like, society calls me white. It's not just me that gets to make that decision. Society calls me white, and I might consider myself part of a brotherhood of man. But how do I individually, um, you know, work on my own whiteness when I'm considered white by everyone else, and I grew up white, and I don't know how to be not white. I can try to be anti-racist, but I don't know how to be not white.
Yeah, exactly. You can't divorce yourself from the colonial construct, and the colonial construct itself uh, situated whiteness on top of an institution of oppression that is quite literally dominating every other person. So when a person tries to say shit like, "Hey, uh, you know, I don't consider myself white. I consider myself a citizen of the world,"
Hmm.
like, all right, well then consider yourself on the way to the fucking gulag, motherfucker. You need to be at the patient
Oh
ASAP.
shit!
You cannot have motherfuckers out here talking about, oh, whiteness is not something that's a part of me. I'm building my own damn identity. Like that's not a real thing.
Right,
You
right,
are a colonized person, or you're a colonizer, and that's just the way it works. In the material world, we didn't ask for this reality. That's the way it is. So you
right.
want to be divorced, from this shit? There's only one way to divorce it, and that's to literally and white supremacy, and the institution of whiteness itself, and that means into capitalism. So you don't want to be white. I will show you the way,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you're not
Right
gonna
on.
like it.
And that makes total sense to me. That like until the institution of whiteness is abolished, then like Comrade Kenny's saying in the chat right now, working against white supremacy and white power, being actively anti-racist. That like I'm still gonna be white to a oh boy. Um, I'm still gonna be white until the institution of whiteness is abolished. Right?
It is what it is. Shit.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and that don't mean I can't work against it. That don't mean I'm like stuck in this construct where I'm.
Oh no, you can be a race trader. We welcome those motherfuckers, but you still white.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
literally.
I mean, especially right now. I'm pink on this side. I'm bright white on this side. Um, so So yeah, LPGWV Steffi, how do we abolish whiteness? I think people in the chat are telling you as far as like working on ending communism, I mean, ending capitalism, ending white supremacy and white power, and being actively anti-racist. There's like that's kind of the first step on the path, ain't it? Um, there may be other
I'm not.
steps. I'm sorry.
I'm
Go
not
ahead,
touching
TM.
that. I ain't touching that one right now. They can read the chat if they want to answer that question.
That's fair enough. Um, all right, so um,
We almost done.
are you talking to your mama?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, reverse racism is some silliness, but white people believe in it and weaponize it. What do you think about reverse racism?
It's bullshit. Let's move on.
Okay, good enough. It don't exist. We don't need to discuss it like we don't need to discuss Santa Claus. Um,
I mean, like, I don't fucking know. It, it's bullshit. Let's move on.
hell yeah. Um,
It's about as real as the free market and the marketplace of ideas. So these are these are it's all bullshit.
yeah. So we don't need to spend no time on it. That's fine. Um,
All
yeah. So I let's see. I think we covered this whole white people being surprised by black anger because white people can't um, just don't listen and have this superiority complex that makes it impossible for us to understand. Last time you came on, we talked about the whole concept of the voice of color theory and the fact that non-white people experience both the white world and the non-white world, whereas white people only experience the white world, can only understand it.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It is a good it's a good thing to talk about. But the one thing I want to talk about on this slide real quick because I know we gotta end it soon, is do you do you think that if a revolution happens that white people are going to be deeply surprised by it?
Only if it's not led by fascists.
Right, right. They're going to know what's happening if it's a fascist revolution. Anything else is going to be like, yeah,
Yeah, white people have their head so far up their ass that they cannot imagine that there are people who are sincerely struggling for something better than what we have now. Because to them, what we have now is clearly like as close to the best we can get as possible. And if we just do a couple of fucking tweaks, we'll be good. We'll be as good as gold. Motherfuckers swore up and down. Barack Obama's election meant that we were this close to ending racism, and if we could just do something about the Trumpists, that we would be all the way there. But clearly, that wasn't the fucking case. Now was it? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
right, yeah,
So yeah, you just have to. We have to fucking engage in reality. And when you talk about engaging in reality, that means questions about race, questions about blackness, questions about whiteness, questions about anything with the racial construct. They have to be engaged in the material reality. And this material reality that racism is anything close to eradicated, uh, that's a that's horseshit. But we're on a path to be able to do something about that racism. And once we do, you know, I think we'll find ourselves existing in a world where the shit will never return.
right on. Hell yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, this is one. Okay, this next one is interesting. Malcolm X talked a lot about how white people use money to control black organizations. That white folks will donate, and then but the donations will always have strings attached. So I
Mhm.
wanted to get your opinion on black organizations accepting white donations and how what's the line that they have to walk.
Let me flip a coin real quick. So, here's the thing about that shit, and this is like the problem with like fiat currency overall, this is the problem with like inflating movements with money and then letting the people who are giving the money dictate the direction of the movement. Because right now, what we have are movements like BLM that is co-opted by liberal donations, white people money. You know, these motherfuckers were found to have been spiriting away something to the tune of like $5 million, some shit like that. We learned recently,
Hmm.
you know, and now they're out here, you know, advocating messages of like reformism, electoralism, totally just deflecting energy away from real radical movement and totally deflecting away from where BLM originally was spreading its message, which is toward like radical reform, radical, and the damn what you call it, the Black Lives Matter itself was formed by Marxists. So now it's been a very long time since here in my hometown we had a BLM protest that was led by anybody that even comes close to something like a radical. The young person that I was mentioning earlier who followed that anti-indigenous protester was associated, excuse me, with BLM, and they ended up just being an arm of the Democratic Party, and that's what ends up happening when you let this money into so-called left, radical movements. The money is typically white. Those institutions that the people that donate the money for are typically corporate, and you end up just serving a corporate agenda, doing corporate advertising and doing literally everything there is, but representing, the radical causes that you were supposed to be fighting for in the first place. Now, that's not to say that the people who individually believe Black Lives Matter are like not sincere when they want to do stuff like end police brutality, do prison abolition and shit like that. But institutionally and organizationally, it's very far, from that goal, and it can't advocate that goal in any substantive way. Um, Influenced by the money the way it is. And that's just why we be trying to tell motherfuckers, like, getting the so called money out of politics is not going to change anything, because these motherfuckers will quite literally just find a way to corrupt who they want to corrupt and to get to who they want to get to, um, without with or without the money. These motherfuckers say get money out of politics, and then that'll give you elected, officials who aren't corrupt, as if the motherfuckers can't get in there, not take no donations while they're in office, and then get a cushy law firm gig or some cushy, tech gig as soon as they get out. Ain't no laws against that shit, is there? You can't tell a motherfucker where they can work, can you? So it's come on, man. We got to get real.
Right on. Fair enough. Um, let's see. I'm going to skip over this one just because I think we've talked a good bit about this. If that's all right. I want to get to Pan Africanism. So, um, the because Malcolm X had a lot to say about this. About the importance of Pan Africanism, and maybe he may not have been one of the foremost authors on it or anything like that, but my impression as I was reading, especially the latter half of the book, was that Pan Africanism became so much more important to him, and he realized that was vital to the movement. But maybe it wasn't maybe it didn't change. Maybe that was always a part of his his understanding. So, what is Pan Africanism, and how does Malcolm X's philosophy kind of work with Pan Africanism?
Well, there was never a time in his life where um, Brother Malcolm wasn't advocating on behalf of his own people. And when I say his own people, I mean black people. When you talk about Pan Africanism, you are talking about the union of African peoples, marginalized and who are interested in decolonization all over this globe. You are talking about, the unity
Mm,
of, like I was talking about earlier, the Cuban African, the Venezuelan African, the American African, the British African, the French African, the Italian African. Any person who is of African descent who wants to build in community a decolonial project from a nation for Black people, a unified Africa is welcome to join. The Pan African movement. We got uh, and this is not really for me to talk about on stream, but we got different people who have different ideas about how to go about building a project within the
Hmm.
movement. Not everybody, in the movement is a communist. Not everybody in the movement is an anarchist. But what we do have in solidarity is what's the word I'm looking for? People who are interested in decolonization.
Hmm.
Now, as a result of that, you got people who are going around here and they're calling themselves Pan Africans, and I guess I am going to end up saying it on stream. But you got these people who are calling themselves Pan Africans, but really they're just co-opting, revolutionary rhetoric, and they're actually opportunists, men who are out here trying to position themselves where they can be capitalist in a nation that they think is going to somehow be divorced from any kind of colonial and imperialistic relationship with the United States. Like that could ever fucking happen.
Hmm.
But you got people who are out here and they still tote anti. They still tote what's the word I'm looking for? Reactionary lines against LGBTQ people, non-men, and all other types of marginalized groups, differently able comrades as well. But they call themselves Pan African simply because they think of themselves as like for a united Africa and for united African peoples. But then those people are trying to exclude some some and African people who they don't personally like, and that's like not something that any person who is a Pan African should be interested in. We got so as Huey said in To Die for the People, it is necessary that if you are going to be a black radical, a black revolutionary, a black nationalist, uh, or believe in revolutionary black nationalism, that you are necessarily a socialist. So even though you got people that are referring to themselves as Pan African, who are pushing these reactionary views, and I mean, God damn it, there's a lot of it, and we're pushing back against it from within inside the community uh, every day. These people are not socialists. You can't be a Pan African without being a socialist. So uh, when you talk about Pan Africanism, the best way to describe what it is and align, is that it's the socialist, the decolonial project for all the people interested in decolonization for all the African peoples in the world. And it is not a movement or an ideology or a way of thinking um, that reactionaries are welcome to.
Hmm.
Quite frankly, those motherfuckers are gonna have to call what they pushing for something else, and that's what we fighting for because that shit ain't Pan Africanism. If it's not inclusive, of all the niggas, then it ain't for us.
Right
You
on.
know what I'm saying? And that's just how it is.
Awesome. It's funny when I've asked about Pan Africanism, I've been told very clearly two things. It ain't yours to give any opinions on, and it is something very good for you to learn about. so,
Yeah.
you know,
And let me reiterate that.
so yeah, I'm just very interested in learning more about it. I went to a great stream this morning about Lumumba. I've been trying to pick up a little. I started reading one of Kwame Ture's books, um, but yeah, I'm just trying to learn. This shit is really interesting. So thank
I
you.
will share. I will share literature with you if you want to learn.
Yeah,
I got you that much. Yeah.
hell yeah. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
finishing up, I just want to talk about Malcolm X's legacy a little bit. You know, I we talked a little bit before about like where he ended up. Um, at the towards the end of his life, and uh, how he not necessarily had changed drastically, he hadn't flipped in some way, but rather that his dialectical understanding of the world had simply grown to encompass it had grown deeper in many ways. And I just love to hear your ideas on how Malcolm X's thoughts influenced the movement today, and uh, what his legacy is.
Um, yeah, Brother Malcolm's the greatest American who ever lived. Uh, Brother Malcolm is somebody who understood the importance of engaging the world materially. And if you had the gall to push like reactionary and like controversial views before you engaged in learning, then you have to, as you change things, have the gall to share that journey and share those and share those shifts and changes and shifts in perspectives and what caused them as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what's not talked about um, enough is the radical love that Brother Malcolm specifically had for black women and non-men. Black Brother Malcolm um, quite literally told us to be willing to kill, for black women in the same way that like the white men were willing to kill for white women.
Mm.
Brother Malcolm took what happened to somebody like Emmett Till and said, "Look what they did to Emmett Till on behalf of a lying ass white woman who definitely wasn't basing her story in any kind of fucking reality," and said, "What the fuck they out here killing for their women." What's the fucking quote? I had pulled it up a little earlier. Yeah, the most disrespected woman in America is the black woman.
Mm.
The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And as Muslims, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us to respect our women and to protect our women. And the only time a Muslim gets real violent is when someone goes to molest his woman. We will kill you for our women. I'm making it plain. Yes, we will kill you for our women. We believe that if the white man will do whatever is necessary to see that his women get respect and protection, then you and I will never be recognized as men until we stand up like men and pay the same penalty over the head of anyone who puts his filthy hands outside of our women. So it's plain and clear. We need to be able to not just be engaged in radical kindness, and which is very important, and revolutionary love for our people, which in this context, in Brother Malcolm's context in mind, is black people, and then in a greater global context, is the working people of the world. But we quite literally have to be willing to engage in violence to protect the people who matter to us the most. In this case, that he was talking about the black woman who was underprotected. So that's his legacy to me, a legacy of a person who understood that violence wasn't necessarily the ideal, but violence was the only is also the only choice that we've been left with. A
Mm.
person who understood that violence is a tool that is available to us to be used when other options had been in good faith exhausted. And by the time he was writing, and probably 50 and 60 and 70 years before that, like every other peaceful option had already been exhausted. So when you talk
Hell yeah.
about Brother Malcolm, this is a person who understood exactly what it is that needed to be done in this country. If he were alive today, he would very much be somebody who would still be pushing for something along the lines of whether it be communism or socialism is irrelevant, but he would definitely be pushing the message of anti-imperialism, decolonization, more radical love for our people, solidarity for the workers all over the globe, and yeah, ending any motherfucker who wants to cross the people, in our lives who matter the most. And that's what it is. So that's his legacy as far as I'm concerned.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on, TN, because that's just you just have a way of putting things so succinctly that it makes sense in a way that I just can't do because I love to string so many sentences together.
Well, I'll always look out for you the best I can, my friend. You
I
know how it
appreciate it.
is.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you, Conrad. I really do. Well, awesome. That's all I had for today, and I wanted to ask you: is there anything like I know we got the Discord? Do you have any other upcoming projects that people should clue into?
Uh, yeah, we got a DPRK presentation coming up on April 19th. Uh, if anybody wants to get involved with that, I'll leave it to you to get the more information because you know you're in the Discord. I'll get it to you. You can get it to the motherfuckers in the
Yep.
Twitch. That ain't no problem. Uh, what else we got coming up? Yeah, we reading Black Shirts and Reds and Bread Theory over on Discord. On Saturdays, we're reading Wretched of the Earth that we're about to wrap up over on Mondays. We're gonna be starting um Black Nine Man Wednesday Theory on in the next few weeks. So that's gonna be good shit. And it probably won't start this week because the person who's gonna be leading it hasn't got back to me. But very much we are engaged in a lot of big things. My birthday's coming up next
Hell yeah.
next Friday too. So if anybody wants to give me a sweater, you know, uh, Gomer has my information. And he got my permission to give it to you. Y'all motherfuckers get me a sweater or drop some fucking money in my cash app and I'll get the damn sweater myself. I
You heard it here. Cash app for sweaters. Awesome. Well, thank you, T, and I love you, buddy. I appreciate you coming on.
appreciate you too, comrade. You take
Um,
care.
so what we're going to do now is we are going to raid, and we are specifically going to raid Lady Oversteegen because she is talking about Eugene Debs today. Um, there you go. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. All right. Awesome. Yeah, TN's gone. He done hung up already. That's awesome. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you. It was great, and yeah, let's get over to my friend Lady Oversteegen. Thank you for hanging out. Love you too, Bean. Really appreciate you coming by today. Um, thank you, George. Thank you, Jason Voorhees. I appreciate that. Appreciate you, Jeff Moodsey. Let's do this thing. There we go.